Hello, and welcome back to the Be Productive podcast. Here we focus on the one thing approach and highlight a different area each week to help you transform how you view, set, and achieve your goals. Through our proven approach, we help you take your big dreams and break them down into smaller goals and activities. And through regular adjustments along the way, you can achieve anything that you want in life. Each week on the Be Productive podcast, we support you in keeping on track and motivated to achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. This month, we're talking about connecting back to our purpose because purpose allows us to identify our priorities, and focusing on our priorities allows us to be highly productive. So if we're starting to feel like we aren't being productive, it could be because we've lost that connection between our priorities and our purpose. And that's why this week we're going to talk about the importance of connecting your goals to your core values, because our core values are what we at The One Thing feel are one of the greatest ways to identify what your purpose is. So I'm joined by Chris Dixon, our Director of Training here at The One Thing. Chris, why is it important to connect your goals to core values?
Yeah, Brooke, I think the way I've always interpreted this, it goes back to purpose, like the general concept of purpose. And for me, purpose has always been these two things. To give this kind of nebulous concept of purpose a little bit more of like a tangible thing you can grab onto. I've always said it's the combination of your values, the things that matter most to you, and the goals that you set. And those two things together, that relationship between your values and your big goals, are what can help give you purpose. I mean, what can come from that over time is more like maybe a purpose statement, which I know it's something that you're really passionate about, and you can start to evolve what that means for you. But that's just a really great place to start. If you want to dig your feet in and say, I want to make some progress, having clarity on what your goals are and the things that matter most to you and your core values and how you see the world is a great way to get started on purpose.
Yeah, what if somebody has created goals and maybe they're just not feeling as married to them or excited about them? Why would it be important to think about your core values in relationship with the goals that you've already set?
That's a great one. I mean, it could be that perhaps your goals are misaligned with your values, or perhaps the things you're doing to achieve your goals are misaligned with your values. And for those reasons, you might not be motivated, or you might not actually feel like your life's in sync with the things that matter most. And I find that for me, values really show up most when I'm not in alignment with them. When you are, it's almost like you're in this kind of resistance free, kind of running with the tailwind kind of state in life, and you're achieving things. It's going smoothly. But if you are struggling to make progress on your goals, you feel not unmotivated, it could be that you aren't in alignment with your values.
Hmm. Sometimes I wonder if we can have goals that aren't connected to our values. I feel like there's got to be a connection at some point. Otherwise, we wouldn't have set the goal at all. And so maybe it's not as obvious as you're thinking about the 1 year goal. It's something like, save $20,000 this year or something like that. And your value is fun. Your number one core value is fun. And it's like, well, that's taking away my fun if I have to save money. But if you think longer than that, maybe it's about how we reverse engineer goal setting with the goal setting to the now process. And that maybe that core value comes into play way later on, maybe at the 5 year or the 10 year or the someday.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, how important is it to just invest the time to get that clarity? And it's sometimes the bigger challenge is you haven't hit and pause or taken the time to really figure out, okay, well, how do I interpret this? Even interpret your own values and your goals and really see where the connection is. Because it could be that there's to your point, it could be a further investment into fun you can have later. And you just have to think about it that way. It's where you can have a little bit of fun now or a whole lot of fun later, and just deciding which means more to you.
Yeah. Another thing that comes up for me is that, our values we're not tattooing these on our body, as we like to say. They're not fixed for life. Our values are something that we come back to on a regular basis, and they change over time. And so maybe the goal that you're setting right now is in relation to an aspirational value that at some point will actually become one of your core values. So it may not be that the goal is connected to one of the values that you identify with right now, but it's something that'll show up in the future.
Yeah, good point. I mean, how important is it to you that you're aware of both what you want in the future, but the things that matter to you now? And,
Mhm.
and do you see a relationship between those two things and what we would say are aspirational values and more in contrast, like what's important to you now?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that
Yep.
there's the today us and the future us, and there's obviously a connection. And if we're striving to become a better person, to become someone who achieves the things that we haven't in our life today, then we have to think about what the values are that go along with that, that we're striving to aspire to, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. And there's even when it's step one is know your core values. And like that's in relation to them is just become aware of them. And step two would be like how do you use them? Like how do you leverage the awareness of your values to influence the decisions that you're making? And a really in one of those things is to zoom out for a longer picture of where you want to go and make sure that at least for what you can see and over the horizon as far as you can see right now, how do those things line up? And then also I think it's important to think about today and the shorter term. You have your goals like a compass for someday to keep you directionally accurate as you navigate life, but then you also need to say like, well, what matters to me now? And my core values are leadership, excellence, and adventure. And when I set my goals for the quarter, if you will, personally, I've got to get a trip in there. Like I've got to go somewhere. I've got to do a hike. I've got to challenge myself. I've got to run a race. Like I just know that about me. That if I go 3 months or maybe six without doing something kind of crazy because I'm just crazy like that, I start to feel unfulfilled. And so I think to your point, it's knowing how your values line up with short term goals and long term goals.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really great point. What about people who may not realize that there's a disconnect between their core values and their goals? What are some of the telltale signs that this is happening if they're not aware of it?
Well, I would say you probably would go first long periods of time without before it would show up because you're not reflecting and you're not
Mm,
taking regular periods of time to ask those questions. It's kind of like if it's become very visible for you where it shows up without you even trying to notice it, you're kind of late to recognizing it. It's not too late, of course, it's never too late, but what you want to do is try to catch it in really small instances or even proactively know it might be coming. And the best way to do that is just have regular reflection where you intentionally ask that question.
mm. Do you do that in your regular reflect and plan sessions that you do every week, or do you do it on a monthly basis? How often does it show up for you?
It's kind of always there as a common thread, but then I would like to say I have a more regimented way of tying core values into that reflection. It just kind of weaves its way in all the time as like an ever present consideration because my values are right there on my 411.
Mhm.
However, it's probably more of like a monthly activity to really just think about values. And even we're really fortunate because we get to facilitate core values activities all the time. And when we do it, I'll selfishly, as people are going through and it's the opportunities there, I'll just kind of flip through a few of them and I'll like, hey, these still my values. So I try to validate them all the time. But I would say that's a really great thing to do is maybe at least once every couple months, do the core values activity again and just either aim to think differently about the values you have today and see how they what they mean for you today or just pressure test that those are still the right ones and that's okay because things change.
Yeah. I definitely think it's important to reflect on the core values. And I think that they show up and can be utilized so many different ways that people aren't thinking about. And when I think about when I've lost that connection between my goals and my core values, I'm noticing it because I'm saying things like, oh, I'll get to that later, or I'm
Mm,
renegotiating time blocks, or not marking things on my 411 green that are related to that goal. And I have to ask the question, go back to like, why isn't this happening for me? Well, it's because I'm not seeing that connection back to the core values. It might be a goal that I'm not really excited about, but if I think about long term, or I think about, next year or the year after, I can start to see that connection to my core values.
That's such a great point. So you're saying, oh, like I'm that box isn't getting checked for multiple weeks in a row. Like let's dig in. Like what's the root cause of that? And there's one possible reason for that is that you've lost the connection to it, and it may not be in alignment with values. Is the kind of deepest root of that.
Yeah. And I see that show up with my coaching clients too sometimes. So it's something that I'll pull out as a tool from my tool belt when I'm working with a coaching client. If they're not checking the box every time that we meet and say, hey, let's go back to core values. Let's go back to the foundation of that pyramid, which is purpose.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point because you've heard me say this before. I always like to use the zoom in, zoom out analogy and like just zoom appropriately. And if you are recognizing you're unable to complete a very small series of tasks, like perhaps because we like to go smaller, and I think there's a lot of value in going smaller, but sometimes you need to zoom out a little bit too, just to get a bigger perspective of like, wait a minute, maybe my values aren't aligned here. I need to take another look at my values and how these connect to my goals, and then zoom back in and go as small as you can.
Yeah. So if we are both in agreement that reflection is the best way to kind of come back to this, creating this connection between core values and your goals, is there one question that's a good reflection question that people can ask if they're stuck in this area?
Specifically surrounding how their values are showing up with their goals.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have one in particular that really rings off. I mean, is there one that you use specifically that comes to mind?
I guess it's not one question. I was trying to use our one thing methodology by picking one question, but I think it ends up being more of a conversation with the person of, let's go back to your values. What's your number one value? What does that mean for you? Can you see this showing up in this thing that you want to achieve? And usually there's an easy connection if you just ask that, you do that exercise for each of the core values. And I don't think that it's going to be all three core values showing up in every single goal. There might be a goal that's, related to core value number one, and another goal might be related to core value number three, or multiple. But yeah, I think there's definitely a good practice in asking that question.
Yeah, something came to mind for me as you said it. I haven't done this personally, but I know someone who I would consider a high performing user of our system. They just have their own adaptation of it. And what she does is she builds her goals in buckets of her core values. So she has a
Mm,
series of goals for each one of her three core values, and it's not always that there's a weekly activity for each one, but it's just kind of a high arching like, hey, this year or this quarter, like I've got to like for each one of my values, there's things I need to be doing to make sure that I'm staying in a relationship with my values. And that could
mm,
be a really great way to set up your reflection so that
mhm.
I don't know that there's one specific question you would say that would just be a home run, but just a series of questions. It's really tying them into how you set up your reflection so that it's effective.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe, yeah, maybe there is an opportunity to set the goals next to the core values and put the goals that you've already created into each one of those three buckets, or four or five, however many core values you might have.
Well, and there you might find too, yeah, you might recognize that there's a goal there that doesn't seem to fit. And then you can ask the question, is this really a, as we say, 20% goal that's going to deliver 80% of my results towards fulfillment with my values? And it could be a nice filter to pass your goals through.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we agree that, making that connection can really help kickstart and remotivate you if you're feeling a little stuck or behind the game or off track, which, if you're interested in joining us on June 24th, we're going to do the mid-year reset as a whole team with the community for 2 hours. So check that out if you're a part of our community. Chris, anything else that you want to add on goals and core values today?
I mean, if you could do one thing surrounding goals and values is just keep them at top of mind, and don't do a set it and forget it activity with both your goals and your values. Just keep them present and in a place where you reflect on them regularly.
Love it. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Be Productive podcast, where we help you transform how you view, set, and achieve your goals. We will see you next time. Bye, everyone.